Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk bugling. It's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's bugling 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record button?
I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something?
Hey, Corey, how you doing today?
Well, I have the advantage of seeing you on video, which the listeners don't, but
Yeah.
I think I'm doing a little better than you are just looking at you.
I can assure you every listener's probably feeling better than I am right now.
You look
Those-
like you do in December after about 3.5 months of living in the mountains, and it's not
I
even
know.
September yet.
I know. I was over at Mountain Tough today. They need to change their name to something like Show No Mercy or I don't know. I'm over
That's
there
pretty much
flopping
what Mountain
around.
Tough stands for.
Yeah, like if you catch a carp and you throw him up on the bank for the seagulls and he flops around there and you're like, maybe he'll flop back into the water. That's what I was looking like over there in the corner working out today. No one's even paying any attention to me. They got a defibrillator over there and everything. I saw a couple of them look at me, look at the defib machine like, not yet.
Maybe he'll
Yeah.
land on the defib machine and take care of himself.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit sweaty. My hair is standing up on end. I look like 2 piles of dog crap, but
Well,
I got here in time.
We'll spare the listeners describing what your legs and your white socks look like, but they can probably imagine.
Well, all you got to do is go out to Mountain Tough and look and watch the 50-plus preseason prep 9-week course. And you better wear your sunglasses if you're watching my white legs and my white socks. But I heard there's been a run on gold toe crew length white socks down at J.C. Penney. So
Well, that's the only place you can buy them, so I guess there probably was a run on them.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sorry we've kind of been off doing our own thing. You've been laid up. I've been in the Northwest Territories of Canada. We just haven't been able to connect, so we really appreciate the patience of the audience.
Well, and I
And,
think they've come to expect it from us this time of year that we're both busy and our paths don't cross quite as frequently. But man,
Yeah.
when they do, we are loaded with content. We've got stories to tell, and
Mhm. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Northwest Territories, you were up there hunting elk, right?
I don't. They do have some elk in the Northwest Territories, I guess, but I was way further north than that. I was at the Arctic Circle.
Man,
Yeah, and
and you're
we were
not
hunting.
talking the place that sells hamburgers and milkshakes.
No,
Different
no.
Arctic Circle.
Yeah, not at all. It's it's in the middle of nowhere, but probably the coolest landscape I've ever hunted.
Really?
I've never seen a place that remote, that wild, that untouched by the hand of man. It was just it reset my button for what wild should be or could be.
Wow.
And but I gotta put this plug in there because and this sounds like I'm bragging, and maybe I'm just proud of the fact that I didn't fall off the mountain so far behind the guide and Marcus that I just got to brag a little bit. But I ended up shooting a ram. So it's day 2. Our guest hunter Great guy. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better sweepstakes winner than Andy. He looks at this ram and it's raining like crazy. It's only like 300 yards away. And he's like, nah, I think I'll pass. Well, he had a guide. I had a guide because up there you got to have a guide, right? So my guide sneaks up and looks through his spotting scope and he turns to me. He's like, you ought to look at this ram. I took one peek at it. I'm like, oh, I don't pass on rams like that. Don't worry about that. Well, this is almost embarrassing. When we saw the rams up on the mountain, the guys started saying, well, maybe there's a couple shooters over in the next basin. And I've heard that, and they start talking, we might get a twofer, right? Two out of one group. Well, Marcus and I tried that in Alaska in 2018, and we got an offer, like a 0. So I left my rifle down with the horses. I stashed it in the trees with the spotting scope and everything. I'm like, I'm bringing close to an empty pack because we're hauling sheep off the mountain today. Well, and so that's why I left my rifle down there. So I tell the guide, I'm like, oh, yeah, Riley, I'll shoot that one. No questions asked. He's like, get your rifle. I'm like, well, it's down there at the bottom of the mountain about an hour and a half away. He's like, what? I'm like, well, yeah, I didn't bring it up here. And he's a wonderful guy, but I'm sure it was all he could do to not show his frustrations of, what? We climb up here and my client doesn't even bring his rifle with him? So I'm like, hey, Andy, I need your rifle. He's about 40 yards up the mountain above us. So I'm doing this charades, like acting like I'm shooting a rifle and pointing at me and, saying, I need your rifle. Finally, Andy starts working his way down there. Well, there are some other sheep watching us. And as Andy's moving, I keep waving him down. I should have just told him to stay still. Those other sheep bolt and they take up. Sheep don't run down the mountain. Sheep run up the mountain.
Yeah.
And so my guide, Riley, he just is like, I can't believe we screwed this up. Well, Marcus is up there just waving us like, get over here, get over here. Well, the ram that I wanted to shoot had stopped 250 yards out in front of Marcus. So we go running up, well, not running, scrambling, crawling, whatever, up this scree slope to get to where Marcus was filming. And we just see the butt of the rams go around the corner and up this chute. And so now Andy has given me his gun and 8 rounds of ammo. And Riley takes off across this big scree slope. And I'm trying to keep up with him. And if you've ever been in scree, like at 30, 35 degree slope, it's hard to just go horizontal because you're kind of falling down.
One step up and 2 steps down. It's 1 step across and 2 steps down. So
yeah.
You're continually trying to angle back up.
Here's this 27-year-old mountain rat running around there, and I'm supposed to be keeping up with him. So we go like 300 yards across this scree slope, and then he hangs a hard right and he goes straight uphill for 200 yards. He found a little rock spine. And I'm supposed to keep up with this guy. And Marcus is keeping up with him pretty well. And we get there and we luck out. And after I get about 3 minutes of rest and breathing, the rams come out and boom, I shoot them, all that stuff. But I can say a year ago, I wouldn't have been able to keep up and be in that situation where that shot would have been a possibility for me. A year ago, before I really started investing in my efforts, my hunting and my health, I would have got there eventually, but it would have been too late. The rams would have been out of view by then. So as I'm walking off as I'm walking off this mountain with this ram in my pack and chatting with the guys, I'm thinking in my head, doing all those Bulgarians that I was cussing about and all those lunges and all these other things. I guess there's a reason you do that stuff. It makes hunts like this a lot more fun. So,
yep.
And the same would apply to elk hunting, right? I mean,
oh my goodness,
you don't have to be a triathlete to kill an elk, but if you want to give it your best effort and you don't want to wake up feeling like you've got run over by a paver every morning, the better shape you're in, the more fun you're going to have.
Yep. No, I mean, it really, and people used to say, it wasn't that long ago where people were talking about fitness and conditioning, and it was almost considered a bad thing. Like,
Yeah.
people would come out and say, "You don't have to be in great shape to kill an elk. You don't have to do this. I've got a neighbor that hunts in blue jeans and he eats donuts and weighs 300 pounds and he kills an elk every year." Well, yeah, nobody's comparing. I don't care to compare my conditioning to somebody else's conditioning. What I want to compare to is, am I in better shape than I was last season? Because if I am, I'm going to have a better chance of being more successful. And like you said, enjoying it a little bit more. It's always going to be tough, but if you can go a little harder, an extra day, if you can go over one more ridge, your chances for an opportunity just keep going up. So that's awesome.
Yeah. So anyhow, for whatever that's worth, I felt really lucky. And so I end up, this is a funny story. I end up shooting my ram with Andy's rifle. Well, this is a horseback hunt, right? The next day, Andy's on the horse. I'm back in camp with my guide and we're fleshing and, cutting up meat and taking care of stuff. Andy and Marcus and his guy, Jason, they go out. Well, Andy's on the horse I've had. And one thing I knew about my horse, Flash, he loved to lay down. You tie him off, you better tie him off like way up high so he doesn't have enough lead rope to lay down. Well, they stop the glass. Andy, ties off his horse. He doesn't know that Flash loves to take a nap. Well, he looks over there and Flash is rolling around doing the dirt roll around and Andy's rifle's in the scabbard. And Flash is like a monster horse. This guy is well over 2,000 pounds. You don't even get bow-legged riding him because your legs just stick out straight out. His back is so wide. It's like you're doing the splits the whole time you're riding him. Well, Andy goes over there. He pulls his rifle out of the scabbard. He looks at it like, yeah, it looks okay. So doesn't think anything of it. Day 6, a ram bigger than the one he passed on, which everyone who sees my ram is like, a guy passed on that ram? I'm like, yeah, thank God. Anyhow, he finds a bigger one and he lines up 240 yards or whatever. Boom. The rams don't even flinch. Boom. The rams are like, oh, there's some cracking noise. Let's butt heads here. So they just start butting heads. I mean, he's missing them so far, not even scaring them.
Man, they sound like turkeys.
Finally they walk off. And I'm seeing all this in footage, right? I'm not there. And now they're like 290. And Marcus is wide enough in the frame that when we got back to civilization where we could look at this on big computer screens, now on the third shot, we see where he hit. He hit about 25 feet left and about 15 feet high.
Wow.
But while they're out there, Marcus and Andy are like, something is wrong. Jason, the guide, is like, I've never seen shooting like this before. This is pretty good. You can't even scare them. Well, Andy's feeling, is my scope loose? What's going on? Marcus grabs the rifle, pulls the bolt out, and looks down the barrel. And when you look down the barrel without the bolt in, it's supposed to be like this nice round circle.
Yeah.
Well, when they came back to camp, Marcus, he's like, look through that barrel. It looked like a football. It was oval shaped. And you could see a slight bend in the barrel up and left. So now Andy's without a rifle, right? He's on the hunt of his lifetime, and his rifle, the horse bent the barrel. So he's got to borrow my rifle. So he ends up shooting. They went and found that ram the next day, and he shot it with my rifle. So I shoot my ram with his rifle. He shoots his ram with my rifle. It's like, I've never seen that before. But
that's
anyhow,
very cool.
That's the beauty of hunting, right? So many crazy things happen. They say the truth is stranger than fiction. I couldn't have made up a script where something like that happens. So fun.
That's so cool. I saw a picture of it, and that was a beautiful ram that you shot. Yeah, and I've eaten doll sheep before.
Oh, it's excellent.
It's so good.
Yeah. So here's the tightwad accountant in me, right? I'm doing the math. Well, to fly this ram back to the States is going to cost X amount. It's really expensive. Trust me.
Yeah.
Freight for all of our camera gear and everything, our extra baggage fees, one way were $900 and some bucks.
Wow.
So I'm like, well, we better eat this ram. It's day 2. Let's eat this sucker. So we ate my whole ram. There was me and Andy and Marcus, us 3, a cook, a wrangler, and 2 guides. Between the 7 of us, we devoured that thing over the next 8 days.
Wow.
So I didn't even have to fly my ram home. We ate the darn thing.
So no wonder you went and worked out today. You shot your ram on day 2 and just sat around camp for 10 days eating rams.
Eating ram and picking blueberries. I can't get the blueberry stains out of my Sitka pattern. Sitka's now got a new pattern. The blueberries were so, I mean, they were everywhere. You'd sit down to glass and you're like, you hear all this popping noise. And you're like, what was that? And then you look, you have blueberry stains all over your butt and in your hands. And so, but our cook made homemade fresh blueberry pie out of the blueberries that we didn't eat. It was impressive. Yeah. So I did do some caribou hunting along the way. So I didn't completely sit on my butt, but then you got, to get home is 3 days. You sit in trucks and airplanes. So yeah, I'm like a slug right now. I'm so out of shape again. How do you lose it so quickly?
And it exponentially ramps up. The older we get, the faster we lose it, and the longer it takes to get it back.
Whew. Boy, ain't that boy howdy on that one, man. When I went and worked out on Monday, I'm like, how could I spend 8 months getting in shape, and in the course of a week, I've turned into just a slug? That's about how fast I could move on Monday. So,
yep. Well, what's crazy is you were in sheep country. It wasn't like you were, hunting on the flat stuff. Right. You were in sheep country moving, but it's just, it's different. But I think, the takeaway is the more you invest in getting ready for something, the more comfortable you're going to be. And we've got to come back and sometimes completely start over. Sometimes start over in the middle. You don't just take off where you left off, especially when you get to your age. I won't include myself in your age bracket quite yet.
I appreciate that, Corey.
Yeah.
But, no, I just, when we got on here, like right now, I got 205 unread emails from the Elk Talk podcast.
I know.
I've read about 205, but I got about 205 yet I haven't read. And a lot of them are about conditioning or other stuff. Like one guy emailed us and said, look, I haven't been in the mountains for 12 years. I live in the lowlands of Texas. I want to go back elk hunting. What do I got to do?
He wants to go solo.
Yeah, solo.
Too.
Yeah, he wants to go solo. I'm like, and he's 63, I think he said. I'm like, first thing I do is go to my doctor and say, I'm not going to blow a gasket when I'm out there, am I?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about a major elevation change. Probably the closest place for him to go is Colorado. So if he's in the lowlands,
from 500 feet to 10,000 feet, that's there's health concerns whether you're in good shape or not. I mean, altitude sickness, things that they're just the elevation changes how your body works, and so making sure you're healthy to start with is important, especially going solo. That's a big undertaking.
Yeah, and I think there's a fine balance between I want to push myself versus just getting over your head, right? I mean, my concern about someone who is very honest in how he wrote the email is, if you go to 10,000 feet in Colorado and you're all by yourself and you're going to try haul an elk out by yourself or put a camp in all by yourself, are you really over your head? Are you just going to be completely shot after the first day? If not, maybe think about a different way to approach it. And so there is this fine line, right, between pushing myself and getting in over my head, where I just like, this was a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like you say, you can push yourself and you can put yourself in uncomfortable situations, but when it becomes dangerous, that's you've got to know where that level is and not push through that. And at 63 years old, coming from Texas, my at least realistic view of that is you better be in decent condition just to be able to tackle something like that. And that's not even considering, some of the dangerous levels you can get into pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, we got another guy who asked a question. This is interesting. I'd never been asked this question before. It says, first, how in the heck do you guys get the bulls to bleed out with the gutless method so when you debone the animal, it's not so damn bloody?
Wow. I don't
I've
think I
never,
saw that email.
yeah.
That's
Yeah, I mean, very complimentary guy. He is just fanatic about elk hunting. He's from Wisconsin. He works on the RMEF committee, coaches high school. It sounds like Corey. He coaches high school basketball and all these kind of things. But he said, I've done the gutless method a few times, and it's always a disaster with blood. I know you guys do a quarter quite a bit, so any insight would be awesome. I'm not exactly sure. I've never really had there's blood, but it's not like, you know, some sort of hemorrhage or something.
yeah. I've never had an issue where you pull a quarter off and the meat is bloody. I mean, obviously there's blood in it and it's going to soak into
Right.
your game bag a little bit, but I've never experienced a difference between gutless, non-gutless, boned in, boned out. I mean, there's always going to be some blood seepage, but I haven't noticed that. And I've never bled an animal out. Like when I get an animal, I don't bleed them out. There's nothing different there.
When the heart stops beating, it's hard to bleed something out.
The blood is where it's in its final resting place.
Yeah. Anyhow, he had some other good questions, but I've not encountered that before. So maybe some of the other in the audience have, but I've probably done the gutless method on I don't know how many, 40,
Yeah,
more maybe. Never really had that. If you do shoot them with a rifle, you're going to have some bloodshot area where you have the entrance wound and exit wound. But I just cut that stuff away because, that just turns into some sort of cottage cheese pucky looking thing that you just, why haul that out? Why put that in a game bag and let all
yeah,
that bloodshot ruin your good meat? So,
yeah. And with bow, it's the same. I mean, you'll get bloodshot from an arrow, and you just cut that. It kind of coagulates, and you peel it off away from the meat and throw it
yeah,
out. But yeah, I haven't had an issue with bleeding out the meat.
yeah. We got a bunch of people who said that they shot their first elk or shot an elk, and they give your Elk 101 University of Elk Hunting a lot of kudos for that, Corey.
That's, and that's honestly, I was talking to a guy just yesterday, and that is the most rewarding part of what I feel we do, is to hear back from people and get to share in their success. And that's, I mentioned it at the elk camp event we did a few weeks ago, that's my motivation. Is I love elk and I love elk hunting, and I love to see other people be successful. And when we get to share in that, whether we were contributing to the success or not, but just to hear of other people's passion and their excitement when they're successful, it's super rewarding.
Yeah. Well, Corey's too modest to give the plug, but if you want to find the University of Elk Hunting, it's out at Outdoor Class, right?
It is. Yeah, it's part of Outdoor Class. And, there's been some changes. We're still working on some changes on the Outdoor Class website and some of the content there. There's new stuff getting added, and there's some cool stuff. But yeah, the University of Elk Hunting, the entire course is there on Outdoor Class Plus, and you get, you've got several courses and modules there. Remy Warren does. There's a lot of really good stuff out there.
Mm-hmm. You do. When I was gone, did our cow elk course get published yet?
I don't think so. I didn't see anything about it. And then I've got one that's coming out soon as well, a new one. So yeah, there's going to be new stuff coming as well as all the existing stuff.
Yeah. So anyhow, if you want to save money out there, use the promo code Elk Talk, I believe, or Elk Talk or Elk Talk 30. Can't remember.
Yeah, try them all.
Try them both.
Yep.
And then we got someone who says, this is my first year elk hunting, and I have some questions about hunting in the rain. Should you do any type of calling in a rainstorm, or is it better to spot and stalk wherever they are bedded? Is rain really?
That's it. I hate rain. I hate being wet. We, you hunt the hunted for Roosevelt, and you're always wet. I hunted in Alaska. We didn't. Fortunately, we killed an elk before it started raining, but then it didn't quit raining. So I mean, it's hunting in the rain is not fun. But I
No,
think there are some, sometimes you don't have a choice. You're out on a 6-day hunt and it rains 3 of the days. You don't just sit at camp. You got to
right.
be out there at least trying to find an opportunity or create an opportunity. A couple things. When it rains, the elk hunker down. They don't like to get wet either. So they're usually in the thick stuff where they're the most protected from the rain. It's hard to get in that wet stuff and move around, which is part of the reason why they're in there, is that's where they're most protected. So makes it really miserable for us. You can't hear as well in the rain. As far as when you let out a bugle, the rain drowns out the noise. It really dampens the noise, even if it's a light rain. So you don't get those clear, when it's a cold, clear morning, you get good acoustics and you can hear a bugle travels a long way. When it's raining, it soaks up that sound pretty quickly. So you aren't going to hear bugles from as far away. Elk are going to be less likely to respond. Elk are going to be harder to track down and find. And we're definitely generally speaking here, because there are times when elk get up and move in the rain and you have to be in the right place and say, I went hunting in the rain. The elk were moving everywhere. But for
Yeah.
the most part, they hunker down in thick places, which aren't very much fun for us. And I call. I mean, if I get to a vantage point, I'm going to be calling. And typically when it's raining, you're going to get responses from a lot closer, just because they can't hear and you can't hear. But when you get a response, I mean, it can be game on, rain or not.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to qualify your statement as I think you call when it's raining, when it's sunny, when it's windy, when it's calm, when it's low light, bright light,
That
when the wind's out of the north, when the wind's out of the south, when the wind's out of the east or west. Corey's
sounds
call.
like a Dr. Seuss book. I call elk in the rain. I call elk in the sun. I call elk for pain. I call elk for fun.
Got a lot of people talking about my unit's on fire. Should I turn my
Yeah.
tag back in? Where should I hunt if I don't turn my tag back in?
Why is my entire unit closed?
Yeah,
Yeah.
bad deal for those whose units are being closed. But as far as fire and elk, it will displace them, but it's not going to chase them 50 miles away. I tell people, as much as the fire for the first year kind of looks like a tragedy, in the year of the fire, it's probably not going to hold any elk. So if it's a large fire, it's probably displaced elk 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 miles from the edge of the fire. But it's also creating higher elk densities in the place that didn't burn.
Yeah.
And so, if you got a fire in August, it's not going to attract much wildlife until the next year. Maybe if you get early rain or rains right after the fire, maybe you could if it's not a super high intensity fire. But I'd hunt the periphery of those burned areas.
Totally. And that's the thing. I mean, elk aren't, like you said, elk aren't going to travel 50 miles when the fire's in the area. They're going to move to the next drainage where they feel safe. And if the fire comes over the ridge there, they'll move into the next drainage. But as soon as that fire stops, that edge of that burn is going to be probably the place they want to be. So they're going to move back to it. And like Randy said, if it's a super intense fire, there's probably not going to be much left in the middle. But a fire that burns kind of spotty and leaves a draw with some good, moisture in it, and there's some lush grass left in there, they'll move through that burn into that draw. And sometimes, they'll feed in there and then they'll move out in bed somewhere else. Sometimes they'll just stay in there. But burns aren't necessarily a bad chase the elk way away. I know one of the emails we got, I think it was a youth or a younger person, said they their unit had a fire, the fire's out, but the whole unit's still closed. What's the reasoning for that? And there's a lot that goes into that. I mean, part of it is it's still incredibly dry out, and they're probably trying to prevent more fires from starting in there in the areas that didn't burn. So sometimes they'll close the whole unit. Sometimes they'll close roads that access areas that there's not even a fire back in there, but it's for, after a fire goes through, if you get a big rainstorm, now all of a sudden you have flash floods, you have erosion and things that can make it a little bit less than safe. And so there's a lot of reasons that go into why areas close, why roads close, but it's typically centered around safety.
Yeah. Man, so many other ones I'm pulling up here. One guy it's kind of an interesting question or comment. He's talking about the benefits of being an RMEF member, and we agree. But then he's like, well, all that does is it doesn't put more elk on the mountain because Game and Fish just issues more tags and we shoot more of them. Yep. That's what we talk about. That when we're saying more elk on the mountain, what we mean is
More elk
we
to hunt.
want those herds to be growing so that they have to issue more tags to keep numbers within objective.
Yeah.
And so it was an I'm not sure if that's the way he meant the question, but he just pointed out that it's kind of. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that what he was pointing out was, hey, we have 100 tags here now. Say there's 500 elk, they give out 100 tags. If we put more elk on the mountain, now there's 600 elk, they're going to give out more tags, and we're going to shoot the elk so the numbers go back to where they were. Well, that's not exactly how they manage it. The numbers are going to grow, but they are not going to shoot them. If objective is 500 elk, then if we get above objective, yeah, we're going to shoot them and keep them at 500. The goal is to increase the habitat, to improve the habitat so we can increase the objective so that there are more elk that can live in that habitat, which allows us to get more tags, more opportunity to hunt, and still keep a higher population of elk. So when we go in and shoot 100 elk out of that 500, Fish and Game has a pretty dialed in formula that says next year there's going to be 500 more elk there. That's the objective. Let's keep it at that. We issue enough tags to keep things at that objective. If that area can hold more elk, let's put more elk in that area, put more tags in that area, and the next year there's going to be that many elk again at that objective. So it's not a matter of let's add 100 more elk and then let's shoot 100 more elk this year and keep it back down at that lower number. It's let's add more elk, more opportunity, and keep those elk numbers consistently higher because the habitat can handle it.
Yeah. So anyhow, we're big fans of the idea of more elk on the mountain to issue more tags.
Yeah.
And put more elk in people's freezers. So
and put more people in a position where they get to experience the awesomeness of elk hunting. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope. I mean, I'm glad he said. I love RMEF, and I think it's a great cause. It was more directed at the state agencies.
Yeah.
But I'm all about whatever we can do to put more elk on the mountain. Sign me up. I've never heard anybody say, "Boy, we just got," or at least not any hunters. There's just too many elk out on that public land. We just got to pull the plug on this operation. I've never heard that. And if I did, I'd be like, you walking around in the same public land that I'm walking around in?
Yep.
But, oh, well, that's how that goes. Another guy asked a question about, he directed this one at me. He said, I'm hoping you can help a bow hunter with some rifle questions. Yeah, he was handed down a 300 Weatherby, really a lethal cartridge. I'm going to come out west big game hunting, mainly for elk, for long ranges. I have 2 questions. And remember, I'm a bow hunter with very little rifle experience. Please give me input on the following. How big and what type of scope should I be putting on my gun? I'd say as far as type, probably for most hunting, you're probably going to want a second focal plane, and you want a variable, probably 3 to 15 or something like that. Probably 44 to, I have 44 millimeter objective lens on most of mine, and I've yet to see a need for these Hubble telescope things like 52 millimeters or whatever. It's like, okay, if you want to tilt that thing around. And then what brand of bullet and grain would you use? Well, I'd probably go back to the 300 Weatherby. I get that you want to use it if it was a hand-me-down, but just make sure you're able to shoot it accurately, because that's a very large cartridge. That thing has a lot of powder, and it is going to loosen your teeth. That's just a fact. I mean, some people are going to say, "Oh, I love mine." Yeah, and you put a brake on it or you put a suppressor on it, and that's why you love it. So maybe that's an option for them. But with any of the 30 calibers, 180 grain bullet is just fine. Like I shoot a 308, and I use 165 grain nozzler partition for elk. Partition bullet's been around since 1948. So if I had a dime for every elk being killed by that bullet, I'd quit doing podcasts. I'd just go elk hunting. But anyhow, the better answer to that question is let your rifle tell you what bullet and what ammo you should use, because every rifle is going to have a little bit of tendency towards a certain bullet. I'm not talking about the cartridge. I'm talking about the bullet, the projectile. I have multiple rifles in the same cartridge, and say a 308, and a couple of them just slightly prefer the Nosler E-tip over the partition, or they might prefer an AccuBond over a partition. So,
and they might shoot better at different speeds. So a heavier bullet that's slower might fly better than a lighter bullet that's faster.
Yeah. And so if you got a shorter barrel, you're going to want to be thinking about how does that affect how well my bullet performs. Am I going to get the velocities that the manufacturer expected I should get out of my barrel? Because most manufacturers, when they put all the data on the box about, here's a 100-yard zero, here's the drop at 200, 300, they're doing that based on 24-inch barrels. Just about all of them are. Well, you start scaling back to a 22 or 20-inch barrel, you're going to have some differences between your true velocities, which is if your muzzle velocity is lower, your velocity as it gets out there is going to be even. It's going to decline faster. And so it's going to take longer to get to whatever your target range is. And gravity is going to work on that bullet longer.
Yep.
So I guess I'm going off in the weeds here, but let your rifle tell you what bullet it shoots best. And shoot it.
And how do you know? I mean, you have to test it. So if you want to find out, you have to buy 3 different boxes of bullets and shoot them all. And what you're shooting and looking at is which one groups tighter.
Yeah. And here's the hard part with some of these really big cartridges is when you're at the bench, it sucks pulling the trigger on that thing. It's hard to isolate how much of it is your own shooting form versus the bullet.
Yep.
In the rifle and the whole combination, the bullet, the rifle, and the scope. So, and I never want to get in the way of someone who says, "Man, I think I'm going to buy a new rifle for this hunt." By all means, that's don't ever talk a guy out of an excuse to buy a new rifle. So if he wants to go buy another one and not wear out the hand-me-down he might have got from dad or uncle or whoever, go buy one.
What caliber did you shoot your sheep with?
A 7M, well, no, 6.5 PRC. I brought a 7M M08, but I ended up shooting it with Andy's 6.5 PRC, and he shot his sheep with my 7M M08. So.
And what about for elk? What's your caliber?
I usually use my 308. If I know it's going to be longer shots, and maybe it's going to be a place that's windy, like in Wyoming, it can be so windy at times. And if I'm in flatter country, I do have a 300 Win mag that when it's suppressed, it's still sweet to shoot.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'll ever hunt again without a suppressed rifle situation. Other than in Canada, you can't bring a suppressor up there. So, but yeah, I would say the majority of the elk in my shop, when people ask me, "What'd you shoot this one with?" I'd say it's 60% 308, 40% 300 Win mag, and there's some 7MMs in there. There's some 270 bulls in there. I shot a moose with my 7M M08 just to prove to people who kind of ridicule me that I walk around with a 7M M08. It's like, you see that Trevor's moose right there? He weighs about half again as much as a really big bull elk. He made it 10 yards. Which, my whole
placement is
and bullet
make
quality.
Make a good shot. And yeah, that's a big one too. No, and I've always been a fan of the 7mm mag. It's a great all around, good knockdown, good distance. I did get a 300 Win mag with a muzzle brake on it, and it doesn't kick hardly at all. It super flat shooting. You can shoot a lot heavier ammo out of it. But I also just got a 7mm PRC, and absolutely love it as well. So I mean, there's so many. We're living in a time when it's preference over quality anymore. There's so many quality cartridges that find what you're comfortable with and what has the ballistics to work for the style of hunting you do, and don't worry about what everybody on the internet says.
No, it's you almost would have to go out of your way to find a bad setup, rifle, ammo, scope setup today compared to what it was 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Every setup I see out there at the range, and I'm going out again tomorrow, it's, myself included, it is the person pulling the trigger is the weak link in what the performance is going to be. And I think the same would apply to a bow. Yeah.
Yep. Same for archery. It's the bows will outshoot the shooter 99.9% of the time.
Yeah. It's so we have a guy who says, hey, Randy, I'm from Wisconsin. I got a lot of questions from Wisconsin this year. All those Wisconsin guys must have drew their elk tags this year. It's regarding elk and their use of water in southwest Montana where you live. And he names a specific range. I'm not going to say what it is. There's so much water. There are lakes, springs, rivers, creeks, and so on. What does a hunter focus on with all these water sources available? Food.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing you focus on when there's not water available. Where's the best feed?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't say whether he's coming archery season or if he's coming in rifle season, but I'm assuming he's probably coming in archery season. And so the cows are going to be where the best food is, and wherever the cows are, the bulls are going to be there. Just that simple. And then if he's coming in rifle season, focus on sanctuaries, because in Montana, everybody who has enough breath to fog a mirror is out there hunting elk with a rifle. So the bulls figure that out real quickly and they go into sanctuary mode. So find the ugliest places where you say, oh man, I really don't want to pack an elk out of there. By the opening weekend after all that shooting starts, within a couple of days, that's where the bulls are going to be in rifle season. So
just be aware that it's going to take a little bit more breath than what it takes to fog a window to get into those places.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. Oh, some guy the other day sent me a personal email, and he said, Randy, I was watching one of your e-scouting videos, and you talk about non-migratory elk, because this guy's going to New Mexico. He's like, I still don't understand when you talk about north-facing slopes. A lot of these are just rolling hills, or they're not like steep slopes like in Montana or Idaho or Colorado or wherever. And the point of that is if say it's a grassland type country, or it's pretty open, like some of the places of New Mexico or some of the places of, even parts of northern or eastern Arizona, if that slope rolls slightly north, it is not going to get hammered by the direct August sun right now. So those slopes will stay slightly greener and slightly more lush than the slopes on the west side or on the south side or the southeast side.
And slightly cooler.
Yeah. They're just, the sun angle isn't there. The soil moisture will retain better. The forage will be more lush. So if you find a place where there's a series of these slopes that roll slightly north, that's where I'm looking for elk in those non-migratory situations. They are so dialed in. Every cow elk out there, every bull elk out there can look at that landscape and say, I'm not going to waste any time over in this spot. That's all torque. I'm going to burn more calories than I'm going to get by trying to graze over there on that west slope. they're going to be in these places where maybe it's not perfect this time of year because a lot of it might have dried up, especially if you don't have a good monsoon season. But they're still going to use the best of what's available out there. And that is always going to be some place that has good grass, but less sun exposure. So,
And just keep in mind, the sun is always going to be to the south. Where we live in the United States, the sun will be to the south of where we are. I mean, just keep that in mind. And it moves from east to west. So in the morning, it's not as hot. It's on the east side of the south exposure. So that southeast exposure is not going to burn off as much as the afternoon heat that's hitting on the west side of that south exposure. So the sun's moving east to west. It's always on that south-facing exposure. Hottest part is going to be the southwest side. That's the afternoon heat. From noon to evening is the hottest part of the day. That's when the sun's most direct, most intense on that face. So the north side of anything, whether it's a rolling hill, whether it's, anything, is going to be cooler because it's not getting direct sunlight the same way as the other side is. And the elk know that. And they don't have a compass. They just know, hey, this side of the hill, the ground stays cooler longer. It's more comfortable to lay here. And also, if there is anything that will cast a shadow, that shadow is always going to be on the north side. So they're going to find a tree, a rock, a cliff, something that is casting a shadow because that shadow is providing protection from the heat. I mean, you just don't get direct sun. So again, it's going to be cooler. So basic concept, just keep that in mind, whether it's a steep, 30-degree slope or whether it's just a little bit of a roller, there's going to be some sort of a refuge for them on that north side.
Yeah. And then you add in the fact that that's probably where the most lush forage is going to grow. They don't have the benefit of saying, well, I'm going to wander around out there and see what I find. The ones that wander around out there to see what they find either starve to death or they die of lead poisoning. The ones that have it figured out, and that's most of them, they just intuitively know. They've learned that over time. Kind of like we learn where the refrigerator in our bed is.
And we don't wander around upstairs looking for a midnight snack. We go straight to the fridge.
Right. And I'm sure people are like, duh. No, it's the point of that is, and the point of answering these questions is to try get people to just have these concepts ingrained in their head as kind of their framework for how they do their thinking of where am I going to find these elk when I'm out there. And so hopefully that helps for those of you who are hunting some of the non-migratory elk. They do accumulate. Have you seen what the monsoon season's doing down there? I haven't even looked since I've been gone.
I haven't either. I'm not hunting anywhere but Idaho this year, so I haven't really focused on conditions anywhere.
I got to go down there next month. My son has a tag, so I better start paying attention. But
I'm just glad we've got a break from the heat here. The fires have been a lot of assistance to the fires. The cool mornings. It was 28 degrees yesterday. Oh, I didn't even think 28 degrees yesterday morning at 8:15. I'm standing along a fence line in this meadow, and all of a sudden I hear a sound that cannot be mistaken. I heard my first bugle of the year yesterday on August 27th. There was a bull that was bugling on his own for probably 15, 20 minutes, probably bugled 5 times. And another bull answered once or twice after that one was done up on the ridge. But it wasn't just wimpy little beginning of season bugle. He was me. I would imagine he was down in the creek bottom. He probably found a tree and was raking a tree and would stop and bugle and then go back to raking a tree because he was getting pretty aggressive and pretty with it. But I've got over the last week or so, I've started noticing a lot of bulls that are rubbed, hard antlered, and roaming. They're starting to roam by themselves looking for cows. So it's time.
'Tis the time, Corey. By the time this podcast drops, there will already be multiple people who have got an elk in the freezer this year.
Yep.
I won't be one of them, but might be you.
I
Won't
won't
be
have one,
me.
but I hope to be able to assist on a couple here sooner than later.
Okay.
I'm hunting with my boys, and I have another friend that has got a tag here, so I'll be hunting with them until Donnie and I leave a little later in the month.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going on a pronghorn hunt. I leave tomorrow. My son drew an Oregon pronghorn tag, but the joint's on fire over there, so I'm hoping that we have a place to hunt. But I'll just drive around. Pronghorn hunting is not conducive to staying in shape. So if you see video of me doing Bulgarians or some sort of rowing thing or some sort of push-up, because I'm trying not to suck air so bad when I get back home. So
You'll be doing that with a sleeve of Oreos sitting on the tailgate next to you.
I better not, because later next month,
You'll pay
Dustin
for it.
from Mountain Tough, he's got a tag. He's like, "Let's go." I'm like, "You want a boat anchor like me to come with you?" He's like, "No, it'll be great. Come on." They talked me into it. So
That's good.
him and his camera guy Nate, they're packing in there, backpacking. I called my buddy Bo. I'm like, "Hey Bo, I'm gonna grab some llamas from you." He's like, "Yeah." I don't care what Dustin and Nate want to do. At my age, if you got access to llamas and you and your camera guy got a bunch of gear, I'm bringing llamas. But
Absolutely.
I'll meet him back there. Maybe if I make it. He'll probably go someplace. He told me where we're going. I'm like, I don't even know if I can get the llamas up that slope. What is this? Like there's a little bit longer, less steep way to get in there. He's like, yeah, but that's no fun. Oh,
Wow.
really? All right. So if you think I look like crap today, Corey, I should take some footage and send it to you when I could get out of that 5 days of hunting with Dustin up in the mountains. So
Well,
I'm
don't
just
send
bringing.
me don't send me footage of how bad you look. Send me a picture of an elk, and
Well, I hope that's the
I'll
case.
judge. Yeah.
I'm going to be walking around with 20 gauge. So if there's a grouse, he's going to be in trouble.
I have been seeing grouse the last week. I'm
really?
super excited. Oh yeah, we got 2 more days here. Archery season opens in Idaho, and grouse season opens the same day. And I'm gonna have a slingshot with some steel balls, and I'll have a bugle tube in one hand and a slingshot in the other.
Oh. All right. So I'm just scanning through a few more questions here. And people are asking, early season bugle or cow call? I know
Yes.
I thought that would be your answer. Kind of see what works and let the elk tell you what works.
Yep. And I location bugle to find elk. And so, we're covering country. I'm using the location bugle to find an elk. From there, I'm moving in close to the elk, and I'm starting with a cow call. And if he immediately answers that cow call, I'm just going to keep giving him cow calls. And if he,
Okay.
if he keeps answering, but he's not coming in, then I've got to figure out, okay, do I want to go aggressive here and give him a challenge bugle? But as long as he's answering that cow call, I'm going to keep sweet talking him with the cow call. He's interested in it. He's communicating with that cow call. If after 15, 20 minutes, he's hanging out in the same place, and I realize he's saying, hey, I'm interested in you, but I'm not interested enough to come to you. You need to come to me. Then I might escalate it and go into a bugle sequence to be able to get him to come in. But I always start with the cow calls when I'm trying to pull that bull in, because it's easy to go from a cow call to a bugle. It can be more difficult to go from a really aggressive, challenge bugle to a bull and then try to sweeten it up with some cow calls. It's always easier to go from the less aggressive to more aggressive than the other way around.
Okay. Huh. So once you thump your chest and jump up and down like Tarzan, it's hard to act like Jane then.
Well, he's thinking, all right, there's an aggressive, mouthy guy over there, and yeah, he's got girls with him, but I'm not too interested in those girls right now.
Yeah.
But if he's interested in those girls enough to talk to him, but he's not coming in, sometimes you get him to talk to the girls, and then you cut him off with a challenge, and that's what he needs to trip his trigger. But if you try to challenge him and that doesn't work, he's probably not going to change his tone. He's like, man, there's a really aggressive bull over there. I need to get some distance because I'm not ready for aggression. And so he's probably going to move away. And then you start cow calling. He's like, if I go in there, that aggressive guy over there is probably not going to be too friendly, and I am not that interested yet. So you see it a lot early season that cow calls can work. They'll pull a bull in, but if that's not working, you get aggressive. You get too aggressive right off the bat, and a lot of times you're just going to push elk away, especially early. Keeping in mind that elk are very territorial right now. The bulls do not want company. They don't want to be around other bulls. So that first 6-7 days of September, it can be really, there's a good efficiency of getting in close to a bull and getting aggressive with him. He's not ready to start herding up cows yet, but he doesn't want the company of another bull coming close to his territory. So you can get aggressive, and a lot of times you think early season it's just got to be timid and a lot of cow calls, but it can be really effective to get aggressive with bugles.
So in that, say you do a location bugle and you hear a bull down on the lodge pole or something, you're going to get close even this time of year, and you're going to test him to see if he's mad that you're now in his area.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get close, and I'm gonna start with cow calls and just see, is he starting to think about cows? Is he starting to think, oh, there's a lone cow here, I'm gonna start hanging out with the cow for the next 3 weeks? Or is he just gonna sit up there and keep bugling at that cow and say, I'm not ready to hang out with you, but I'm interested, and if you come up here, we can get to know each other for the next few days till I do get interested. But I'm not going to waste energy to come down there and round you up. Then you can get aggressive. And he's like, oh, there's a cow and a bull down there, and the bull's really close to my territory. I don't want company right now. I'll go down there and chase him away. But yeah, I'm always going to move in as close as I can. I'm always going to start with cow calls, and then if I need to, I'll escalate it to bugles. And I would say this time of year, it's 50-50. As we get closer from the 10th through the 25th, I'm almost always going to escalate it to getting aggressive with bugling.
Good to know. I'm making notes, folks. People can't see this, but I'm over here, got my pen, doing some chicken scratching there. It's like, Randy, this time of year, here's Corey's plan.
You're making a grocery list with Oreos on it.
No, I don't want to be that guy like in the intro of the podcast when you say, what are you doing calling me with an elk question when there's an elk 100 yards away? I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
So, but what else we got? I mean, I'm not going to go through all 205 emails while we're on the podcast, but I really appreciate all the people who sent them. There's some really good questions, and it's fun that this time of year, the shift of questions and comments goes from, in the off season, it's tag issues, it's political
gear,
or policy issues, gear. Now it's just like, I'm going elk hunting.
Yep.
Tell me, give me some thoughts. What's your opinion on how I'm going to kill one here?
Yeah,
So.
And we do get a lot. And again, I think it's worth restating because we say it every year when we're talking about e-scouting or determining where to go hunting. Randy and I aren't going to tell you where to go hunting. That's just,
right.
It's not fair to us. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to the other hunters. Yep. Don't ask us, where should I hunt? We aren't going to answer that. So, I get it. It's overwhelming, but hopefully we've provided enough information on how to find areas that you're able to go and find an area using that information. The next thing is, this time of year, I cannot tell you how many emails we've gotten that say, I'm going hunting next week. What advice do you have for me? There's books. There are volumes written on advice on elk hunting. So, without knowing where you're going, how you're going, what your hunting style is, how much preparation you've done, any of that, the advice that I think the best advice I can generally give is pay attention to the wind always.
Yeah. I did reply to one of those kind of vague emails that came in earlier in the month. And I'm sure the guy is like, what? They said, take your wife to dinner the night before you leave.
You just can't get away from it. You can't get away from the marriage advice.
Well, I said, I'm sure you're wondering why I said that. because elk hunting is a lot of mental, and if you're distracted and you knew you should have took your wife to dinner, but you didn't. So when you left for your week-long elk hunt, you could tell she was going to give you a case of the mean mouth. Well, if you would have took her to dinner the night before, bought her some flowers, maybe whatever, she would have almost pushed you out the door and gave you a big hug, and you would have just went on your way with no mental distraction. And that is going to increase your odds of killing an elk more than whatever other advice I could have given you.
You know, Randy, for once, I think you nailed the marital advice. I don't think you'll find anybody that'll argue with you. Even our wives wouldn't argue with you on that one. So
Right.
Good answer.
The guy happened to be a guy, but if it was a woman, I would have said, buy your husband a free round of golf and a 12-pack of beer for his buddies or something. I don't know. We get some of these, the point is we get some of these questions that are really generic and open-ended. And so if you get a response from one of us that's a little bit like what I just said, we're trying to take your generic question and bring it back to a point that might be relevant. And in that case, the relevance was, I hope I made the point that you got to be, elk hunting is as much of a mental game as it is a physical game. Yeah, it's really tough country. It is a lot of work. But if you're distracted and probably left home, left the pot on the burner kind of thing, you're probably going to find excuses of, it's raining today. I think I'm just going to fold it up and go home 3 days early. There's just all these little things that do everything you can to clear your mind and be mentally sharp and ready to go.
And know that by day 3, the newness and the excitement has probably worn off, and now you're in the grind, and every day becomes a grind to get up and go back out and repeat the potential of another unsuccessful day. So, I mean, it really is, and Randy's 100% on. If you know you left and your wife wasn't happy, if you are 4 days into it and you're starting to feel bad for something you did or didn't do before you left, the draw to go back home when hunting is tough or the weather's not good, it's real. And it happens to every one of us. Like it's as much as I love hunting elk and as many seasons and days as I've spent in a tent, I'll tell you right now, by day 4 of almost every hunt, I'm thinking about going home. And you got to just power through. And the more tough you are mentally and the more prepared you are mentally to face those challenges and face those last few days of a hunt, the more opportunities for success you're going to have. So great advice. But while you're out there wandering around and deciding whether you should stay there or go home, make sure you have a wind detector in your hand and you're checking the wind, because you're not going to get close to an elk if you're not paying attention to the wind.
The audience is probably thinking, well, now I know how a almost 60-year-old accountant answers a question versus how an engineer answers a question. Oh, man. I apologize to that guy. He probably thinks I was being a smart aleck, but I was trying to take a generic question, funnel it down a path that maybe would help him. I don't know. Maybe I failed.
And that's a good reminder to everybody who is sending in emails. The more specific you can be, the more likely we're going to spend time answering it, just because if it's so open-ended, it's a very general, we don't have enough detail to even give you anything that's going to be helpful. So give us detail and we'll do our best to provide some comment on it.
Yeah. So if people want to know about meat care and hot weather, go back and listen to some of the old episodes of Elk Talk Podcast. We've covered that in great depth, because I see we've got a few questions about, hey, I'm going out the first week of season. It looks like it's going to be hot. And when I read that question, I went and looked at the forecast the first week of season here in Montana. When does it open? It opened, well, I don't think ours opens till next week, but something like that. Yeah. But next week, the first week of September, it's going to be 90 degrees at, Bozeman is where I live. My house is 5,000 feet. So that's hot weather.
90 degrees at 5,000 feet is not pleasant to hunt in.
Yeah. So you're going to have to learn how to take care of meat in hot weather if you're successful. And sometimes you can do everything possible to take care of that meat, but you're just going to have to ruck meat out of there all night long to get it somewhere where it's not going to spoil. I mean, I can probably make it a day or two if I can get it in the shade and get the wind blowing on it, in the mountains. But you get temps like it's forecast to be next week. And even after a day or two doing every trick I know, I start worrying about, is that meat going to make it?
Yep. Yeah, and the most important thing you can remember this time of year is get the hide off of that meat as fast as you can. And always the first 2 weeks of September, it doesn't matter if I'm concerned, if it's cooler out, I always take a knife and I run it right along the leg bone, especially that hind leg. The rear quarter, if I just take a knife and run it right down the bone to the ball joint there, it opens that up, it lets that heat, and the heat will just pour out of that. So get the hide off, open it up so it can release the heat from the bone. The bone holds the most heat. It's in the center of the mass of insulation, which is the meat, and open that up so the heat can escape. And for the most part, if it's in the shade, you got a little breeze on it, it's going to be fine. It's going to cool right off and you'll be fine. But like Randy said, after 2 or 3 days, if it's getting up into the 70s, 80s, and it's only cooling off into the high 40s, low 50s at night, you got to start at least checking it and making sure you're paying attention to it, because you don't want to ever have to throw away a quarter of elk because you left it hanging in too long and it got too hot.
And that becomes a reality when you're doing a buddy hunt, right?
Yeah.
One guy shoots an elk and the weather is just hot. You got to get out of there and get that one elk out of there. And the buddy guy's like, hey, wait a second, what about my elk? Well, when you sign on to do this together, the other guy's just going to have to defer and wait until you get that elk taken care of. And don't get mad at the guy who shot it. It just it is what it is. It's just part of hunting. So
I came up with a solution.
What's that?
Well, we're doing the destination elk hunt this year, and we're going to have 8 of us out there, and it's going to be the 3rd week of September, so it should be cooling down. But the last thing we want to do is shoot an elk on day 1 and then leave it hanging there. We'll be in the backcountry. If we leave it hanging there and we hunt all the way till day 8, that's a long time for taking care of meat and hoping it lasts. So I've got a buddy that a couple of years ago, he texted me and he said, hey, do you think hunters would have any interest in this? And I clicked on the picture. He's got an enclosed trailer with an air conditioner on the front of it and racks on the inside of it to hang elk meat on.
No way.
And I said, oh, that's a great idea. Well, I hadn't thought about it until a few months ago. So I reached out to him and said, did you do that? Did you make a trailer? And he said, I've got 4 of them. He rents them out in September, 4 hunters to take for a week to their camp. And it's got an AC and a generator on the front. When you shoot an elk, you put the quarters in there and fire up the generator. And so we're renting one of those and taking it with us for the week. And we're going to have places for several elk to be hanging if we need it.
So are you going to tell the world where they can rent from this guy, or are you hogging them all?
Okay. My biggest concern is if I tell people, then he's only got 4 of them, and it doesn't. And plus, it's very, geographical. Obviously, nobody's going to drive from Colorado up to Idaho to pick up a trailer and take it down and bring it back. But he's in the Boise area, and it's Davis Cold Storage, I think, is the name of what he's doing. But yeah,
I never thought
really
about
cool
that.
idea. I hadn't either. I saw a guy once that had a horse trailer, and he took the horse trailer and he sprayed foam about 3 inches thick all over the inside of the horse trailer, and then he added same thing, had a air conditioner on the top front of it and a generator hooked to that. And we actually stored meat. He's over in Oregon, and we stored meat for I think a couple days. And at one time we shot an elk and just drove it to his house and fired up the generator and ran the AC. But we went in there, and it was cold as a walk-in freezer. Yeah. And I'd thought about it. So yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah, it is. Now you got me thinking. I do have a cargo trailer that needs a fire. Maybe I just need to spray it with foam and
There you
get my
go.
little Yamaha generator running there and little compressor and call it good.
Yep.
But that's interesting. I
Yeah.
always told my wife that if ever I can't hunt anymore, I'm just going to build a walk-in freezer or walk-in cooler in my 30 by 50 shop, and I'm going to charge elk hunters to hang their meat in there. And she's like, "Good luck with that." I don't know what she meant by that. Like,
Whenever your wife says good luck with that, you don't ever ask more questions. It's like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know what else there is.
Yeah, that's kind of the end of the road of all my business ideas is when she's like, "Good luck with that." It means that I've missed something in my enthusiasm. I've overlooked something really obvious that she can see. And she's like, "Good luck with that." And, early in your marriage, she'd entertain it and give some thoughts and ideas. And, oh, well, maybe. Now, after like 20th year, she's just like, "Good luck with that." So, well, Corey, have we covered enough today to give people their money's worth? I mean, it costs a lot to subscribe to this podcast. I mean, it is free, but we do have for anyone wondering, we have a money back guarantee on this podcast. We will guarantee to give you your money back. So, it looks like Corey quit anyhow. Yeah. Well, Corey's internet dropped. So, folks, I guess we are done. I'm going to close it out here while Corey tries to reconnect his internet. And hope you all get out there and have a great season ahead. When he and I both get back from our short trips here, we'll try to do another one. And keep sending the questions out there at Elk Talk Podcast. Appreciate y'all listening. Take care.